Chapter 4. Like a newborn child, the magician wept for a long time before he could speak. "The poor old woman," he whispered at last. The unicorn said nothing, and Schmedrick raised his head and stared at her in a strange way. A gray morning rain was beginning to fall, and she shone through it like a dolphin. "No," she said, answering his eyes. "I can never regret." He was silent, crouched by the road in the rain, drawing his soaked cloak close around his body until he looked like a broken black umbrella. The unicorn waited, feeling the days of her life falling around her with the rain. "I can sorrow," she answered gently, "but it's not the same thing." When Schmedrick looked at her again, he managed to pull his face somewhat together, but it was still struggling to escape from him. "Where will you go now?" he asked. "Where were you going when she took you?" "I was looking for my people," the unicorn said. "Have you seen them, magician? They are wild and sea-white, like me." Schmedrick shook his head gravely. "I have never seen anyone like you, not while I was awake. There were supposed to be a few unicorns left when I was a boy, but I know only of one man who had ever seen one. They are surely gone, lady, all but you. When you walk, you make an echo where they used to be." "No," she said, "for others have seen them." It gladdened her to know that there had been others as unicorns as recently as the magician's childhood. She said, "A butterfly told me of the Red Bull, and the witch spoke of King Haggard, so I am going wherever they are to learn whatever they know. Can you tell me where Haggard is king?" The magician's face almost got away, but he caught it and began to smile very slowly, as though his mouth had turned to iron. He bent it into the proper shape and time, but it was an iron smile. I can tell you a poem," he said, "where all the hills are lean as knives, and nothing grows, not leaves nor lives. Where hearts are stout as boiled beer, Haggard is the ruler here." "I will know when I get there, then," she said, thinking he was mocking her. "Do you know any poems about the Red Bull?" "There are none," Schmedrick answered. He rose to his feet, pale and smiling. "About King Haggard I know only what I have heard," he said. "He is an old man, stingy as late November, who rules over a barren country by the sea. Some say that the land was given and green and soft once, before Haggard came, but he touched it and it withered. There is a saying among farmers when they look on a field, lost to fire or locusts or wind, as blighted as Haggard's heart. They say also that there are no lights in his castle and no fires, and that he sends his men out to steal chickens and bed sheets and pies from window sills. The story has it the last time that King Haggard laughed, the unicorn stomped her foot. Schmedrick said, "As for the Red Bull, I know less than I have heard. For I have heard too many tales, and each argues with another. The Red Bull is real. The Red Bull is a ghost. The bull is Haggard himself when the sun goes down. The bull was in the land before Haggard, or it came with him, or it came to him. It protects him from raids and revolutions, and saves him the expense of arming his men. It keeps him a prisoner in his own castle. It is the devil to whom Haggard has sold his soul. It is the thing he sold his soul to possess. The bull belongs to Haggard. Haggard belongs to the bull." The unicorn felt a shiver of sureness spreading through her, widening from the center like a ripple. In her mind, the butterfly piped again. It passed down all the roads long ago, and the Red Bull ran close behind them and covered their footprints. She saw the white forms blowing away in the bellowing wind, and yellow horns shaking. "I will go there," she said. "Magician, I owe you a boon, for you set me free. What would you have of me before I leave you?" Schmedrick's long eyes were glinting like leaves in the sun. "Take me with you." She moved away, cool and dancing, and she did not answer. The magician said, "I might be useful. I know the way into Haggard's country, and the languages of the lands between here and there." The unicorn seemed very near to vanishing into the sticky mist when Schmedrick hurried on. "Besides, no wanderer has ever been worse for wear with a wizard's company, even a unicorn. Remember the tale of the guest wizard, the great wizard Nikos. Once in the woods he beheld a unicorn sleeping with his head in the lap of a giggling virgin, while 3 hunters advanced with drawn bows to slay him for his horn. Nikos had only a moment to act. With a word and a wave he changed the unicorn into a handsome young man, who woke, and, seeing the astonished bowmen gaping there, charged upon them and killed them all. His sword was a trimmed, tapering design, and he trampled the bodies when the men were dead." "And the girl?" the unicorn asked. "Did he kill the girl too?" "No, he married her. He said she was only an aimless child, angry at her family, and that all she really needed was a good man, which he was, then and always, for even Nikos could never give him back his first form. He died old and respected, of a surfeit of violence, some say. He never could get enough violence. There were no children." The story lodged itself somewhere in the unicorn's breath. "The unicorn did him no service, but great ill," she said softly. "How terrible it would be if all my people had been turned human by well-meaning wizards, exiled, trampled in burning houses. I would sooner find the Red Bull had killed them all." "Where are you going now?" Schmedrick answered. "Few will mean you anything but evil, and a friendly heart, however foolish, may be as welcome as water one day. Take me with you, for laughs, for luck, for the unknown. Take me with you." The rain faded as he spoke, and the sky began to clear, and the wet grass glowed like the inside of a seashell. The unicorn looked away, searching through the fog of kings for one king, and through a snowy glitter of castles and palaces for one built on the shoulders of a bull. "No one has ever traveled with me," she said. "But then no one ever caged me before, or took me for a white mare, or disguised me as myself. Many things seem determined to happen to me for the first time, and your company will surely not be the strangest of them, not the last. So you may come with me if you like, though I wish you would ask me for some other reward." Schmedrick smiled sadly. "I thought about it." He looked at his fingers, and the unicorn saw the half-moon marks where the bars had bitten him. "But you could have never granted my wish." "There it is," the unicorn thought, feeling the first spidery touch of sorrow on the inside of her skin. "That is how it will be to travel with a mortal all of the time." "No," she replied. "I cannot turn you into something you are not, no more than the witch could. I cannot turn you into a real magician." "I didn't think so," Schmedrick said. "It's all right. Don't worry about it." "I'm not worrying about it," the unicorn said. A blue jay swooped low over them on that first day of their journey and said, "Well, I'll be a squab under a glass and flapped straight home to tell his wife about it. She was sitting on the nest, singing to their children in a dreary tone. Spiders and soundbugs and beetles and crickets, slugs from the roses and ticks from the thickets, grasshoppers, snails, and a quail's egg or two, all to be regurgitated for you. Lullaby, lullaby, swindles and schmemes, flying's not much fun as it seems. Saw a unicorn today, the blue jay said as he lit. You didn't see any supper, I notice, his wife replied coldly. I hate a man who talks with his mouth empty. Baby, a unicorn! The jay abandoned his casual air and hopped up and down on the branch. I haven't seen one of those since the time. You've never seen one, she said. This is me, remember? I know what you've seen in your life and what you haven't. The jay paid no attention. There was a strange-looking party in black with her, he rattled. They were going over Cat Mountain. I wonder if they were heading for Haggard's country. He cocked his head to the artistic angle that had first won his wife. What a vision for King Haggard's breakfast, he marveled. A unicorn coming to call, bold as you please, rat-tat-tat on his dismal door. I'd give anything to see. I suppose the two of you didn't spend the whole day watching unicorns, his wife interrupted with a click of her beak. At least I understand that she used to be considered quite imaginative in matters of spare time. She advanced on him, her neck feathers rustling. Honey, I haven't even seen her, the blue jay began, and his wife knew that he hadn't and wouldn't dare. But she batted at him anyway. She was one woman who knew what to do with a slight moral edge. The unicorn and the magician walked through the spring, over Soft Cat Mountain, and down into a violet valley where apple trees grew. Beyond the valley were low hills, as fat and docile as sheep, lowering their head to sniff at the unicorn in wonder as she moved among them. After these came the slower heights of summer, and the baked plains where the air hung shiny as candy. Together she and Schmedrick forded rivers, scrambled up and down brambly banks and bluffs, and wandered in woods that reminded the unicorn of her home, though they could never resemble it, having known time. So has my forest now, she thought. But she told herself that it did not matter, for all would be as before when she returned. At night, while Schmedrick slept the sleep of a hungry, footsore magician, the unicorn crouched awake, waiting to see the vast form of the Red Bull to come charging out of the moon. At times she caught what she was sure was his smell, a dark, sly reek easing through the night, reaching out to find her. Then she would spring to her feet with a cold cry of readiness, only to find 2 or 3 deer gazing at her from a respectful distance. Deer love and envy unicorns. Once a buck in his second summer, prodded forward by his giggling friends, came quite close to her and mumbled without meeting her eyes, "You are very beautiful. You are just as beautiful as our mother said." The unicorn looked silently at him, knowing that he expected no answer from her. The other deer snickered and whispered, "Go on, go on." Then the buck raised his head and cried out swiftly and joyously, "But I know someone more beautiful than you." He wheeled and dashed away into the moonlight, and his friends followed him. The unicorn lay down again. Now and then in their journey they came upon a village, and there Schmedrick would introduce himself as a wandering wizard, offering, as he cried in the streets, to sing for my supper, to bother you just a little bit, to trouble your sleep ever so slightly, and pass on. Few were the towns where he was not invited to stable his beautiful white mare and stay the night, and before the children went to bed he would perform in the market square by lantern light. He never actually attempted any greater magic than making dolls talk, or turning soap into sweets, and even this trifling sorcery sometimes slipped from his hands. But the children liked him, and their parents were kindly with supper, and the summer evenings were light and soft. Ages after, the unicorn still remembered the strange chocolate stable smell, and Schmedrick's shadow dancing on the walls, and doors and chimneys in the leaping light. In the mornings they went on their way, Schmedrick's pockets full of bread and cheese and oranges, and the unicorn pacing beside him, sea white in the sun, sea green in the dark of the trees. His tricks were forgotten before he was out of sight, but his white mare troubled the nights of many a villager, and there were women who woke weeping from dreams of her. One evening they stopped in a plump, comfortable town where even the beggars had double chins, and the mice waddled. Schmedrick was immediately asked to over to dinner with the mayor and several of the rounder councilmen, and the unicorn, unrecognized as always, was turned loose in the pasture where the grass grew as sweet as milk. Dinner was served out of doors at a table in the square, for the night was warm and the mayor was pleased to show off his guest. It was an excellent dinner. During the meal, Schmedrick told stories of his life as an errant enchanter, filling it with kings and dragons and events and noble ladies. He was not lying, merely organizing events more sensibly, and so his tales had a touch of truth even to the canny councilmen. Not only they, but all manner of folk passing in the street leaned forward to understand the nature of the spell that opened all locks if properly applied. And there was not a one but lost a breath at the sight of the marks on the magician's fingers. Souvenir of my encounter with a harpy, Schmedrick explained calmly. They bite. And you were never afraid? A young girl wondered softly. The mayor made a shooing noise at her, but Schmedrick lit a cigar and smiled at her through the smoke. Fear and hunger have kept me young, he replied. He looked around the circle of dozing, rumbling councilmen, then winked widely at the girl. The mayor was not offended. It's true, he sighed, caressing his dinner with linked fingers. We do lead a good life here, or if we don't, I don't know anything about it. I sometimes think that a little fear, a little hunger might be good for us. Sharpen our souls, so to speak. That's why we always welcome strangers with tales to tell and songs to sing. They broaden our outlook, set us to looking inward. He yawned and stretched himself, gurgling. One of the councilmen suddenly remarked, My word, look at the pasture. Heavy heads turned on nodding necks, and all saw the village's cows and sheep and horses clustered at the far end of the field, staring at the magician's white mare, who was placidly cropping the cool grass. No animal made a noise. Even the pigs and geese were as silent as ghosts. A crow called once, far away, and his cry drifted through the sunset like a single cinder. Remarkable, the mayor murmured. Most remarkable. Yes, isn't she? The magician agreed. If I were to tell you some of the offers I've had for her. The interesting thing, said the councilman who had spoken first, is that they don't seem to be afraid of her. They have an air of awe, as though showing her some sort of reverence. They see what you have forgotten how to see. Schmedrick had drunk his share of red wine, and the young girl was staring at him with eyes both sweeter and shallower than the unicorn's eyes. He thumped his glass on the table and told the shining mayor, "She is a rarer creature than you dare to dream. She is a myth, a memory, a will-o-wish, a wail-o-wisp. If you remembered, if you hungered." His voice was lost in a gust of hoofbeats and the clamor of children. A dozen horsemen, dressed in autumn rags, came galloping into the square, howling and laughing, scattering the townsfolk like marbles. They formed a line and clattered around the square, knocking over whatever came in their way and shrieking incomprehensible brags and challenges to no one in particular. One rider rode up in his saddle, bent his bow, and shot the weathercock off the church's spire. Another snatched up Schmedrick's hat, jammed it on his own head, and rode off roaring. Some swung screaming children onto their saddlebows, and others contented themselves with wineskins and sandwiches. Their eyes gleamed madly in their shaggy faces, and their laughter was like drums. The round mayor stood fast until he caught the eye of the raiders' leader. Then he raised one eyebrow. The man snapped his fingers, and immediately the horses were stilled, and the ragged men as silent as the village animals before the unicorn. They put the children gently on the ground and gave back most of the wineskins. "Jack Jingly, if you please," the mayor said calmly. The leader of the horsemen dismounted and walked slowly toward the table where the councilmen and their guest had dined. He was a huge man, nearly 7 feet tall, and at every step he rang and jangled because of the rings and bells and bracelets that were sewn into his patched jerkin. "Evenin', Your Honor," he said with a gruff chuckle. "Let's get the business over with," said the mayor. "I don't see why you can't come in quietly, like civilized people." "Ah, the boys don't mean no harm, Your Honor," the giant grumbled good-naturedly. "Cooped up in the greenwood all day, they need a little relaxin', a little catharsis like. Well, to it, eh?" With a sigh, he took a wizened bag of coins from his waist and placed it in the mayor's open hand. "There you be. Yet, Your Honor," said Jack Jingly, "it ain't been much, but we can't spare no more than that." The mayor poured the coins into his palm and pushed at them with a fat finger, grunting. "It certainly isn't much," he complained. "It isn't even as much as last month's take, and that was shriveled enough. You're a woeful lot of freebooters, you are." "It's hard times," Jack Jingly answered sullenly. "We ain't to blame if travelers have no more gold than we. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, you know." "I can," said the mayor. He scowled savagely and shook his fat face at the giant outlaw. "And if you're holding out on me," he shouted, "if you're feathering your own pockets at my expense, I'll squeeze you, my friend. I'll squeeze you to pulp and peel and let the wind take you. Be off now and tell it to your tattered captain. Away, villains." And as Jack Jingly turned away, muttering, Schmedrick cleared his throat and said hesitantly, "I'll have my hat, if you don't mind." The giant stared at him out of bloodless buffalo eyes, saying nothing. "My hat," Schmedrick repeated in a firmer voice. "One of your men took my hat, and it would be wise for him to return it." "Wise, is it?" grunted Jack Jingly at last. "And who be you, pray, that knows what wisdom is?" The wine was still leaping in Schmedrick's own eyes. "I am Schmedrick the magician, and I make a bad enemy, he declared. I am older than I look and less amiable. My hat. Jack Jingly regarded him a few moments longer. Then he walked back to his horse, stepped over it, and sat in the saddle. He rode forward until he was hardly a beard's thickness away from the waiting Schmedrick. Nah, then, he boomed, if you be a magician, do summat tricksy. Turn my nose green, fill my saddlebags with snow, disappear my beard. Show me some magic, or show me your heels. He pulled a rusty dagger from his belt and dangled it by the point, whispering maliciously. The magician is my guest, the mayor warned. But Schmedrick said solemnly, very well. On your head be it. Making sure that with the edge of his eye that the young girl was still watching him, he pointed at the Scarecrow crew grinning behind their leader and said something that rhymed. Instantly, his black hat snatched itself from the fingers of the man who held it and floated slowly through the darkening air, silent as an owl. Two women fainted, and the mayor sat down. The outlaws cried out in children's voices. Down the length of the square sailed the black hat as far as a horse trough, when it dipped low and scooped itself full of water. Then, almost invisible in the shadows, it came drifting back, apparently aiming straight for the unwashed head of Jack Jingly. He covered himself with his hands, muttering, nah, nah, call it off. And even his own men snickered in anticipation. Schmedrick smiled triumphantly and snapped his fingers to hasten the hat. But as it neared the outlaw leader, the hat's flight began to curve, gradually at first, and then much more sharply as it bent towards the councilman's table. The mayor had just time to lunge to his feet before the hat settled itself comfortably on his head. Schmedrick ducked in time, but a couple of the closest councilmen were slightly splattered. In a roar of laughter, varyingly voluntary, that went up, Jack Jingly leaned from his horse and swept up Schmedrick the magician, who was trying to dry the sputtering mayor with a tablecloth. I misdoubt you'll be asked for encores, the giant bellowed in his ear. You'd best come with us. He threw Schmedrick face down on his saddlebow and galloped away, followed by his shabby cohorts. Their snorts and belches and guffaws lingered in the square long after the sound of hooves had died away. Men came running to ask the mayor if they should pursue to rescue the magician, but he shook his wet head, saying, I hardly think it will be necessary. If our guest is the man he claims to be, he should be able to take care of himself quite well. And if he isn't, why then, the sorcerer and impostor taking advantage of our hospitality has no claim for our assistance. No, never mind about him. Creeks were running down his jowls to join the brooks in his neck and the river of his shirt front, but he turned his placid gaze toward the pasture where the magician's white mare glimmered in the darkness. She was trotting back and forth before the fence, making no sound. The mayor said softly, I think it might be well to take care of our departed friend's mount, since he evidently prized her so highly. He sent 2 men to the pasture with instructions to rope the mare and put her in the strongest stall in his very own stable. But the men had not yet reached the pasture gate when the white mare jumped the fence and was gone into the night like a falling star. The 2 men stood where they were for a time, not heeding the mayor's commands to come back, and neither ever said, even to each other, why he stared at the magician's mare so long. But now and then after that they laughed with wonder in the middle of a very serious event, and came known to be considered frivolous sorts. The end of chapter 4.